Dustin here with DG's ProTech. Today, guys, we're going to talk all about your diesel fuel injection system on a modern diesel engine and diesel fuel contamination problems. So in DG's shop today, we have a commercial customer. And this commercial customer, like others, picks up his fuel at a commercial fuel station. Unfortunately, this 6.4 liter customer picked up some bad fuel. And if that bad fuel is pushed through a modern diesel engine, we end up having some failure problems. Now, this is something a lot of our customers see from time to time. It seems to be a worse problem in winter because diesel fuel does have a certain amount of moisture that it builds up into it. So we're going to talk about what it does to the inside of your diesel fuel system so you know the importance of keeping it out of there. We've got the fuel tank out of this truck. This is where the fuel is stored, and really, guys, it's going to just have anything that was put in there. So if you've picked up bad fuel from a farm fuel tank or a diesel fuel station that doesn't sell a lot of diesel fuel, there may be moisture in that that's collected, and you're going to get a big gulp of it. It's important in doing these high pressure system repairs that we don't ignore the low pressure and supply systems. So it's important that we drop this tank, verify that this tank has clean, adequate diesel fuel in it before we finish our repair. You're going to get a good look at this very dirty diesel tank, and we found the source of the contamination because it had about an inch of mud on top of it as well as water inside of it. So again, definitely don't neglect the very basics in your diesel fuel system to keep things like this from happening. This commercial customer, being a F550, has a fairly long flat deck. His flat deck has a fuel tank that is an after axle design, so at the very back of the truck. Systems like this sometimes will see contamination issues if they're not brought in with the fuel coming into the tank. Sometimes you'll have a vent problem where we have moisture getting in from snow buildup. Now, in this customer's case, we're not sure if that's the entry point. Regardless, doing a quick fuel sample as a basic fuel test at the engine and the fuel filter system, we noticed that there was quite a bit of fuel and debris within the system. From there, it's DG's technicians' jobs to check the fuel filter system and the amount of contamination, and then potentially any corrosion or debris that have built up in the system with that contamination. From that, we do some electronic diagnostic to test the output and flow return or flow rates of the injectors, verify if they have gotten into some of the debris and water, and also the injection pump, because it may also have picked up debris and water. The reason we're talking about the importance of this is because these components can be very expensive to replace. So having adequate water separation and out of your fuel, and then adequate fuel filtration will keep these components running strong for a long period of time. We're going to step back for a second and talk about the pump and the fuel system in a stock truck like this, and it's very similar across all brands, and show you some of the weak points. So in this truck, your fuel pump, which brings fuel from the fuel tank we talked about, up to the engine, is located inside the frame rail. Now, some vehicles, the lift pump is located on the engine. Some vehicles, the lift pump is located in the tank. Regardless, the outcome and how it uses that fuel is the same. In this unit, the water separator, the fuel pump, the lower fuel filter, which is a more coarse fuel filter, and the water separator, and the water and fuel sensor are all located in this unit. One of the downsides to this specific unit on the 6.4 liter is that the chamber that separates the water and is not really big enough. So we see a lot of trucks where the truck had some water in it, it separated it as it should have correctly, but once that chamber has filled up with water, there's no more room for it to take on any more water. Now, having your diesel on a regular basis serviced by a diesel shop, they'll be draining that water separator if they're doing it correctly. We see too many times where a customer gets their service done and that drain is ignored and the water's not separated off. And over a long period of time, we see high pressure injection system where the lift pump is sending its fuel, failure points because that was kind of neglected. In this customer, we had already gone ahead and installed a fast fuel system, and you've heard us talk about these before. In this truck, the reason we talk about it is because on the 6.4 liter, we talked about the shortcomings in the separation system there. The fast has a much better water separator system that's easy to use, and then also a better filter system on it as well. So it's going to pick up that debris, separate the water so that you don't have it up at the engine. This specific 6.4 liter customer unfortunately had a quite amount of water and debris go through the system, and he had a complete fuel system failure. So It's our job to make sure by doing a permanent repair that any debris that's in the system is cleaned out. On this truck, you will notice a brand new fuel filter housing, new lines at the high pressure injection pump up to the rail. The rail has been flushed and cleaned. Any of the low pressure supply lines have been flushed and cleaned, and turning the return side that goes through the cylinder head, new high pressure lines to our injectors, and new fuel injectors. And if that sounds like a big list, it is a big list, and it can be an expensive one. The idea is any contamination that has damaged any of these components, if we simply make a repair, say to an injection pump, the injection pump may have debris in the system that is waiting in this rail to do injection or injector damage after the repair for the injection pump has already been done. We're going to give you a couple examples here on the bench in a second, guys, to show you some contamination that came off of this truck, what it visually looks like, just in case you're wondering why we have so many components here. Contamination issues in our 6.4 diesel, we're going to show you some of the components that have the contamination in them, starting with the low pressure fuel supply and the filter system. Now, this is your fuel filter, which is actually we put in there as an attempt to try and see if we could separate some of the water. You see this corrosion, if the camera can get in there in the bottom of this housing? There is corrosion that's built up in the bottom of this housing, and we actually had metal debris floating in the bottom of this cavity where the fuel filter sits down in. If we cannot adequately clean out that corrosion, there's the chance that that would recontaminate and do issues down the road. Of course, this is the 6.4 common rail fuel injector. It's a piezoelectric injector. That's how it electronically opens and closes to inject diesel fuel. This is your inlet tube coming in. So it's important to make sure that your inlet tubes were clean and free of debris. They were not, so they'll get replaced with each individual injector. The other thing to know on certain vehicles that these are actually a one-time use. So once they've been put on, torque to spec, they're actually a crush fitting, so they should be replaced anyways. The return for the 6.4 actually comes through the body of the injector and through the cylinder head. As I said before, we're going to flush that out as well. Your high pressure lines, very similar to the high pressure lines at the rail, from rail to injector. We also have high pressure lines from injection pump to the rail. Again, contamination was found in here, it must be replaced, and it's that same style one-piece design crush fitting anyways. Talking about the injection pump. The injection pump on the 6.4 there is quite a complicated unit. It uses a pressure control and a volume control regular valve built into the pump. This is a Siemens style pump. These regulators and valves are not serviced separately from the pump, so when you have a failure, even if it was just simply as a regulator failure, you have to replace the pump as a complete unit. In the back of this pump, it's a piston style pump, there's a swash plate inside here. So we can easily open and access this cover on the back of the pump to look for contamination and damage. And if there's contamination and damage there, then we definitely have to replace this pump as a unit. Pretty simple to change once the cab is up. 3 bolts, change out the gear. You'll notice there's quite a bit of debris in the inlets. These are the inlets, so your fuel coming in and your high pressure fuel going out. And then it also recirculates that fuel, guys. So when these systems start to fail, it's common to see contamination to make its way back to the fuel filter housing and then circle back and go back through the pump again. So if the pump starts to fail in that swash plate, like I said, it's going to recirculate debris back in, and that's why these failures happen as quick as they do. A couple other components we're going to change for good measure in there, and this is not trying to up the customer's bill, it's more from experience. The fuel rail pressure sensor has a common failure point on the electrical side, so that's going to be changed as just good measure so we don't have a fuel pressure sensor failure. And this customer's truck is a high mileage one that hasn't had this failure yet, so again, an updated part there to make sure the truck keeps going for a long time down the road. So we're not picking on Ford in this case, although we seem to do a lot of that in our shop. The importance of this video is for customers to understand clean fuel will keep your diesel happy for a long time. Whether your stock fuel system has adequate fuel separation, you the owner, or having a good shop that's going to service your diesel well, including draining that fuel water separator valve and getting that out of there, or having an aftermarket system like a Fast put on at an early enough mileage that we keep that high pressure system and its expensive components going longer, are all very important things. If you do suspect water in your fuel system because the dash is telling you water and fuel, it's always safe to be shutting the truck down, checking for that contamination, draining it out before you attempt to restart. In doing that, there's a better chance you're going to save your high pressure injection system, guys, so that you're not in a situation like this where we've got to fix a lot of components in your truck. So for this episode of DG's TV, guys, I think we're all done. Make sure you're following DG's ProTech on Facebook and all the other social media aspects. Go onto our website, www.dgsprotech.com. Follow us along there. Always good things happening in our shop, and we'll see you next time.